Dr. Sarah Chen's breath fogged the inside of her helmet as she brushed away centuries of Martian dust with practiced precision. The beam from her helmet light caught something beneath the rust-colored powder, a glint of metal that had no business being 30 meters below the surface of Mars. "Control, are you seeing this?" She adjusted her shoulder camera to focus on the anomaly. The slight delay in communication made the silence feel longer than it was. "Confirmed, Dr. Chen. Spectrometer readings are unusual. The metallic composition doesn't match any known Martian minerals." Dr. Williams' voice crackled through her comms. Even through the static, she could hear the excitement in his tone. Sarah carefully extended her brush's carbon fiber handle, sweeping away more dust in deliberate, measured strokes. The metallic surface beneath expanded with each pass, revealing geometric patterns that were too precise to be natural formations. Her heart raced, but her hands remained steady. 20 years of archaeological experience had taught her that haste was the enemy of discovery. "Team 2 and 3, converge on my location," she ordered, marking her position with a laser beacon. "Bring the ground-penetrating radar. Whatever this is, it's big." Within an hour, the chamber's entrance emerged from its millennia-long slumber. The door, if you could call it that, stood 3 meters tall, its surface covered in flowing patterns that seemed to catch and reflect light in impossible ways. Dr. James Rodriguez, the team's physicist, ran his scanner over the surface for the 5th time. "These patterns," he shook his head in disbelief, "they're not decorative. Each one is a perfect mathematical sequence expressed in physical form. This isn't just advanced technology, Sarah. This is like finding Leonardo da Vinci's notebook, except it's written in equations we haven't even theorized yet." Sarah placed her gloved hand against the surface. Even through the insulated material, she could feel a slight vibration. "It's still active," she whispered, more to herself than the team. After all this time, the chamber's opening mechanism proved surprisingly intuitive, a simple pressure plate that responded to human touch. As the door silently receded into the walls, Sarah's light revealed a sight that would rewrite humanity's understanding of its place in the cosmos. Crystalline structures lined the walls, each one pulsing with a faint, blue-white light. They rose from floor to ceiling in perfect helical patterns, like DNA strands made of starlight. But it was the central pedestal that drew everyone's attention. Above it, floating in midair, was a holographic display showing schematics that rotated slowly in 3 dimensions. "My God," Dr. Williams breathed, his earlier excitement replaced by awe. "Those are weapon schematics." Sarah stepped closer, her trained eye taking in details that others might miss. "No, not weapons. Look at the energy flow patterns. These are defensive systems, shield generators, if I'm reading this correctly." Rodriguez was already setting up their portable quantum computer. The mathematical principles behind these designs, they're operating on levels we've barely begun to theorize about. This isn't just advanced technology. This is perfect technology. Every component, every calculation, refined to its theoretical limit. As Sarah studied the flowing diagrams, something nagged at the back of her mind. The designs were perfect, yes, but perfection had its own limitations. She'd seen enough ancient human technology to know that sometimes the most brilliant innovations came from working around limitations, not achieving theoretical perfection. "Download everything," she ordered, "and set up a secure quantum link to Earth. The UN Space Coalition needs to see this immediately." She paused, watching the holographic schematics rotate. "I have a feeling we're going to need every expert we can get to understand what we found here." Little did she know, humanity wouldn't have the luxury of time to study these discoveries at their leisure. High above Mars, in the darkness between the stars, sensors that had lain dormant for millions of years began to awaken, sending signals into the void. The first sign that something was wrong came from Europa Station's astronomical array. Dr. Elena Martinez was checking routine telescope data when she noticed the anomaly. A perfect circle of darkness, where HD 40,000, 307 should be. She ran the diagnostic protocols twice before calling her supervisor. The star isn't just dimmed, she explained, pointing to her holographic display. It's completely gone, as if something's blocking all light from reaching us. Within hours, more stars began to vanish. Not random patterns, but a methodical progression of disappearances, like someone drawing a line across the night sky with an eraser. The scientific community buzzed with theories, but deep in the Mars facility, Sarah Chen felt a cold certainty about what was happening. She stood before the holographic schematics they'd discovered, now partially decoded. "Look at these power signatures," she told Rodriguez, highlighting a section of the display. "Whatever we found here, someone else knows about it, and they're coming to claim it." The first transmission arrived precisely at noon UTC. Every communication device on Earth, from quantum terminals to ancient radio receivers, activated simultaneously. The voice spoke in perfect English, yet carried harmonics that made listeners' teeth ache. "We are the Vextari, guardians of the predecessor legacy. You have accessed knowledge that is not yours to possess. You will surrender all artifacts and data discovered in the Mars facility within 30 standard days." Sarah watched the transmission from the facility's command center, her fingers tracing the edge of a crystalline data core they'd extracted. "They don't know we've already decoded part of it," she whispered to Rodriguez. "They think we're just holding artifacts." The Vextari weren't finished. Their demonstration of power came without warning. Jupiter's moon Europa, home to humanity's most advanced deep space research station, shuddered as invisible forces gripped it. The evacuation order came just in time. 3,000 researchers and staff escaped before the moon cracked like an egg, its pieces spreading out in an elegant spiral pattern that would have been beautiful if it wasn't so terrifying. "Perfect destruction," Rodriguez muttered, reviewing the sensor data. They didn't just destroy it. They took it apart with absolute precision, like a watchmaker disassembling a timepiece. In the aftermath, the UN Space Coalition convened an emergency session. Sarah found herself standing before representatives of every spacefaring nation, the weight of her next words heavy on her shoulders. "The technology we discovered isn't just defensive," she explained, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "The predecessors built it as part of a larger system, one that the Vextari now possess and have mastered. But there's something they don't understand about their own technology." She brought up a holographic display of the schematics. The predecessors achieved theoretical perfection in their designs. Every component, every calculation refined to its absolute limit. The Vextari worship this perfection. But perfection— she paused, making eye contact with each council member— perfection can be predictable. The council chamber erupted in whispered conversations. Admiral Chen, no relation but a staunch ally, leaned forward. "What exactly are you suggesting, Doctor?" Sarah's fingers danced across the display, highlighting specific sections of the schematics. The predecessors abandoned these designs not because they failed, but because they reached their limits. They couldn't improve them further. "But we don't think like the predecessors, or the Vextari." She brought up footage of the Europa destruction. "They expect us to either surrender or try to use the technology exactly as it was designed. They're not prepared for what humanity does best, taking something perfect and making it better by making it imperfect." Above Mars, the Vextari ships hung like black diamonds against the stars, waiting. They had given humanity 30 days to surrender technology they considered sacred. Instead, they had given humanity 30 days to do what it did best: innovate. 72 hours without sleep had turned the holographic schematics into a blur of light and mathematics before Sarah's eyes. Empty coffee cups littered her workspace in the Mars facility's main laboratory, each one marking another failed attempt to understand what the predecessors had created. "Dr. Chen," Rodriguez's voice carried genuine concern. "You need rest. We've been at this for—" "Look at this." Sarah's voice was hoarse but intense. She gestured at a sequence of equations floating in the air. "We've been approaching this all wrong. All this time, We thought the predecessors were showing us their success. She stood, her movements energized despite her exhaustion. The holographic display responded to her gestures, spreading out into a three-dimensional map of gravitational fields. These aren't success records. They're failure logs. Rodriguez stepped closer, his fatigue forgotten. What do you mean? The predecessors didn't leave these designs as a blueprint, Sarah explained, her hands dancing through the light. They left them as a warning. Look at these power calculations. They're not showing us how to build it. They're showing us why they stopped. The revelation hit her team like a physical force. For 3 days, they'd been trying to understand how to replicate perfect technology. But perfection, Sarah now realized, had been the predecessor's limitation. The gravitational manipulation. She continued, pulling up new sections of the schematics. It works. It's flawless. But it's also unchangeable. The predecessors built it to be stable, predictable, eternal. They'd reached the theoretical limits of what could be achieved within those parameters. Admiral Chen's hologram appeared in the lab, his expression tense. "Doctor, we're down to 26 days. Please tell me you found something we can use." Sarah's smile carried the manic edge of someone on the brink of either brilliance or breakdown. "Better. I found something we can improve." She brought up the original shield generator designs. The predecessors, and by extension, the Vexteri. They think in terms of perfection. Every calculation, every component refined to its absolute mathematical limit. But that's not how human engineering works. Her fingers traced a complex series of energy flows. We build redundancies. We include safety margins. We plan for failure because we know nothing is truly perfect. And that's exactly what the predecessors never considered. Rodriguez's eyes widened as he followed her logic. You want to deliberately introduce imperfections into perfect technology. Not imperfections, Sarah corrected. Adaptations. Look at these gravitational field equations. The predecessors designed them to be stable, uniform, predictable. But what if we don't want stability? What if we want controlled chaos? She highlighted a section of the design. The mathematical patterns shifted, revealing new possibilities. The predecessors abandoned this technology because they couldn't make it more perfect. But we can make it better by making it imperfect. Admiral Chen leaned forward, his hologram flickering. In plain English, Doctor, the predecessors built this to create stable gravitational fields, like shields or barriers. Perfect, unchanging, and therefore predictable. But if we modify these field equations, introduce deliberate irregularities. She paused, letting the implications sink in. We can create gravitational waves that oscillate, that change patterns, that can be turned from defense into offense. The Admiral's eyes narrowed. You're talking about weaponizing a shield generator. I'm talking about taking technology built for absolute stability and teaching it to dance, Sarah replied. The Vexteri understand the predecessor's technology perfectly. But they don't understand human innovation. They can't imagine taking something perfect and deliberately making it unstable. Rodriguez was already running simulations. The power requirements would be enormous, he warned. And we'd only get one shot at implementing these modifications before the Vexteri realize what we're doing. Sarah looked up at the Martian sky through the facility's dome, where the Vexteri ships hung like dark stars. Then we better make it count. The crystalline core pulsed with energy as Sarah carefully adjusted its molecular structure. Each modification required precision at the quantum level. One mistake could shatter technology millions of years old. Sweat beaded on her forehead, despite the lab's cooling systems running at maximum capacity. Field stability at 67%, Rodriguez reported, monitoring the readouts. We're approaching the theoretical limit for controlled instability. Sarah nodded, her hand steady as she manipulated the quantum tools. That's exactly where we want to be. The predecessors never let their fields drop below 98% stability. They couldn't imagine intentionally introducing chaos into the system. The team had transformed the Mars facility's main chamber into a testing area. Holographic projections showed the gravitational field modifications in real time, swirling patterns of energy that looked more like abstract art than physics equations. Admiral Chen's hologram appeared at his usual station. Status report, Doctor. We're detecting increased activity from the Vexteri fleet. They're probably sensing our power fluctuations, Sarah replied, not taking her eyes off her work. But they'll interpret it as primitive attempts to understand the technology. They can't conceive of us actually modifying it. The Admiral's expression remained stern, and if they realize what we're really doing, then humanity better hope I work faster than they do. She gestured to a new display. Look at these field patterns. The predecessors designed their gravitational technology to create perfect spherical fields, but we're teaching it to create waves, ripples, intentional interference patterns. Rodriguez's console emitted a warning tone. Power consumption is off the charts. Even with our most advanced reactors, we'd never generate enough energy to power this system. Sarah allowed herself a small smile. That's because we're not going to use reactors. She brought up a new set of calculations. We're going to use the sun. The Admiral leaned forward. Explain. The predecessors built their technology to be self-contained, perfect systems. But humanity's greatest achievements have always come from working with our environment, not trying to control it completely. She highlighted a section of the modified schematics. We're going to build solar collectors around Mercury, massive ones. The proximity to the sun will give us all the power we need. The engineering challenges, Rodriguez began, are exactly what humanity excels at, Sarah interrupted. We've never built anything like this before, which means we have no preconceptions about how it should be done. No perfect solution to limit our thinking. She stepped back from the crystalline core, which now pulsed with an irregular rhythm that would have horrified its original creators. The predecessors built this technology to harness gravity. The Vexteri preserved it exactly as it was made. But we're going to make it do something new. Admiral Chen studied the readouts. You're talking about reversing the gravitational effect completely. More than that, Sarah explained, bringing up a simulation. We're going to create cascading gravitational waves. Instead of a perfect shield that stops everything, we'll generate fields that pull things apart layer by layer. The Vexteri's perfect shields are designed to resist consistent force. They've never encountered anything like this. The simulation showed a test object breaking apart, not in random chunks, but in precise layers as gravitational waves moved through it like ripples in a pond. The effect was both beautiful and terrifying. 23 days remaining, the Admiral reminded them. How close are you to a working prototype? Sarah's expression hardened with determination. The modifications are nearly complete. But we need to begin construction on the Mercury collectors immediately, and we'll need every engineer Earth can spare. She looked up at her team, seeing the same mix of exhaustion and excitement in their faces that she felt herself. We're about to attempt something that both the predecessors and the Vexteri would consider impossible, and worse, improper. We're going to take perfect technology and deliberately make it imperfect. Above them, through the facility's dome, the Vexteri ships continued their silent watch, unaware that beneath them, humanity was about to rewrite the rules of what their sacred technology could do. Mercury's surface blazed under the relentless solar bombardment as construction drones swarmed across its sun-facing side. Chief Engineer Maya Patel watched from the command ship's observation deck, her dark eyes reflecting the gleam of countless solar collectors taking shape below. 3-minute shifts are too short, she muttered, watching another team of suited figures retreat to their radiation shelters. We're losing too much time in rotations. Sarah's hologram flickered beside her, the Mars-Mercury transmission delay, creating ghost-like echoes in her image. We can't risk longer exposures. Even with our best shielding, the radiation levels this close to the sun are barely manageable. The Solar Collection Array was humanity's largest engineering project in history. Hundreds of thousands of mirrors and collectors spread across Mercury's surface, each one precisely aligned to channel energy toward the massive receiving station being constructed in orbit. 15 days, Maya reminded Sarah. The Vexteri deadline is getting closer, and we're barely at 40% capacity. Sarah's hologram nodded, her expression tense but determined. The modified core is ready. We just need enough power to activate it. She paused, studying the construction feeds. How are the automated systems holding up? Better than expected, Maya replied, pulling up diagnostic data. The new thermal management systems are performing well. We're actually learning a lot about high-temperature engineering that we never. Warning klaxons cut through their conversation. Maya's hands flew across the control interface. We've got movement in the Vexteri fleet. 3 ships breaking formation. The dark vessels, almost invisible against space itself, glided closer to Mercury's orbit. They made no aggressive moves, but their presence sent waves of tension through the construction teams. They're curious, Sarah observed, but they still think we're trying to build primitive defenses. The design similarities to their own technology are too basic for them to recognize. Maya watched the alien ships with a mixture of fear and fascination. It's strange, isn't it? They're so advanced, yet they can't imagine technology being used in any way except the perfect way it was designed. On her screens, construction continued. Teams of engineers from every nation on Earth worked in perfect coordination, their former rivalries forgotten in the face of extinction. Chinese thermal specialists collaborated with American drone operators, Russian radiation experts advised Indian shield technicians, and European precision engineers fine-tuned Japanese power systems. Look at that, Sarah's hologram gestured to the activity. This is what they don't understand about us. Humans have never achieved perfection, but we've always excelled at adaptation. A sudden burst of light from the surface drew their attention. One of the primary collectors had achieved first light status, its massive array focusing solar energy into a coherent beam that streaked across space toward the receiving station. Power output exceeding predictions by 12%, Maya reported, unable to keep the excitement from her voice. The fractal collection surface design is working better than we hoped. Sarah's expression brightened. Send the data to Rodriguez. He can adjust the core's power intake parameters to match the higher output. The Vexteri ships continued their silent observation. Their sensors would be detecting the energy readings, but to them, it would appear primitive and inefficient compared to their own perfect systems. They couldn't comprehend that humanity had intentionally built imperfection into the design, creating systems that could adapt and exceed their theoretical limits. 10 hours until the next array comes online, Maya noted, checking the construction schedule. If we maintain this pace, we'll be ready, Sarah finished. We have to be. Above them, Mercury's sun-scorched surface continued its transformation. The solar collectors spread like a metallic web, each one a testament to human ingenuity and determination. The Vexteri had given humanity 30 days to surrender technology they considered sacred. Instead, they were watching humanity do what it had always done best: take something existing and transform it into something new. In the Mars facility, the modified core pulsed with increasingly irregular patterns, its perfect symmetry deliberately broken, waiting for the moment when humanity would show the galaxy that perfection wasn't the only path to power. The control room of the Mars facility had never felt more crowded or quiet. Sarah stood before the main display, surrounded by holographic feeds from every major space center on Earth. Deimos hung in the center screen, its irregular shape familiar to every astronomer in human history. In less than an hour, that familiarity would change forever. Mercury arrays at 98% capacity, Maya reported from her station. Energy transfer is stable. The receiving station is channeling power to the core exactly as calculated. Sarah nodded, her fingers dancing across the control interface. The modified core pulsed behind its containment field, its rhythm now completely divorced from the perfect symmetry its creators had intended. Begin final power-up sequence. Rodriguez, monitor the field stability. Field stability at 62% and falling, Rodriguez announced. Exactly where we want it. Admiral Chen's hologram appeared, his usually stern expression showing rare tension. Doctor, the Vextari ships near Mercury are moving. They've detected our power surge. Let them watch, Sarah replied, her voice steady despite her racing heart. They're about to learn something about human innovation. The core's pulsing increased, its light casting strange shadows across the facility's walls. Energy readings climbed steadily as power from the Mercury arrays poured into the system. Warning indicators flashed across multiple screens, the kind of warnings the predecessors had designed to prevent exactly what humanity was attempting. Field generation in 3 minutes, Sarah announced to the waiting stations across the solar system. All observation posts, prepare to record. We're about to do something that hasn't been done in millions of years, and we're going to do it wrong. A nervous chuckle rippled through the gathered scientists. They all understood the magnitude of what they were attempting. The predecessors had created perfect technology. The Vextari had preserved it perfectly. Humanity was about to prove that imperfection could be more powerful than perfection. Core temperature nominal, Rodriguez reported. Field generators aligned. Sarah, we're ready. She took a deep breath, her hand hovering over the activation control. Initialize gravitational wave sequence. The modified core's light shifted from blue to purple, its irregular pulses sending vibrations through the facility structure. On the main screen, Deimos hung unchanged for a moment longer. Then it began to dance. The first gravitational wave hit the small moon like an invisible tide. Instead of creating a uniform field as the predecessors had designed, the modified technology generated oscillating waves of gravitational force. The surface of Deimos began to ripple as if it were liquid. First layer separation beginning, Rodriguez announced, his voice filled with awe. Field strength exceeding predictions by 20%. On every screen across human space, observers watched as Deimos began to peel apart. Layer by layer, the moon separated into concentric shells, each one held in perfect position by overlapping gravitational waves. What had been a solid body transformed into a suspended artwork of rock and ice, spread out like the pages of a book open to the stars. Energy consumption within parameters, Maya reported from Mercury. We can maintain this field strength for the full planned duration. Sarah allowed herself a small smile. Initiate second phase. The gravitational waves shifted frequency. The suspended layers of Deimos began to rotate, each one moving in a different direction. The effect was hypnotic and terrifying in its implications for any solid object caught in the field. The Vextari ships are accelerating, Admiral Chen warned. They finally realized what we've done to their sacred technology. Too late, Sarah replied, watching the final phase of the test begin. The rotating layers of Deimos shuddered as new gravitational waves passed through them. In less than a minute, the entire structure collapsed inward, transforming the moon into a cloud of perfectly sorted particles, each size class separated by its own gravitational field. Where Deimos had been, a new ring system now orbited Mars, a demonstration of power that combined artistic precision with devastating potential. Test concluded, Sarah announced to the waiting worlds. The weapon works, and we've just shown the galaxy that humanity's greatest strength isn't in achieving perfection. It's in knowing exactly how to break it. The Vextari flagship emerged from the darkness of space like a cathedral built from shadows. Its surface absorbed both light and hope, a perfect expression of its creator's dedication to technological purity. Sarah watched it approach on the Mars facility's main display, its massive form making their own achievements seem suddenly small. Energy readings from their ship are off the scale, Rodriguez reported, his voice tight. They're using multiple predecessor cores, all operating at perfect resonance. The facility's communications array crackled to life. The Vextari's voice carried the same tooth-aching harmonics as before, but now there was something new in it. Outrage. You have committed the ultimate blasphemy, the alien voice declared. The sacred technology of the predecessors was perfected through eons of development. Its patterns are inviolate. Its principles are absolute. Sarah stepped forward, her voice clear and steady. The predecessors achieved perfection, yes, but they abandoned these designs because perfection was a dead end. There was nowhere left to go. The massive ship hung above them, its perfect form an accusation against humanity's imperfect modification. Smaller Vextari vessels moved into formation around it, creating a geometric pattern that would have been beautiful if it wasn't so threatening. "Your species will be erased," the Vextari announced. "Your corruption of perfection cannot be allowed to spread." Maya's hologram appeared from Mercury Station. Solar arrays at maximum capacity. Energy transfer systems ready. We're at full power. Sarah's fingers moved across her control panel, initiating the modified core's powered-up sequence. "You worship the predecessor's perfection," she told the Vextari. "But you never asked why they stopped. Why they abandoned technology that had reached its theoretical limits." Silence. The alien voice reverberated through the facility. "You understand nothing. Your primitive attempts to modify sacred technology will show you something new," Sarah interrupted. She nodded to Rodriguez. "Initiate gravitational wave sequence." The modified core pulsed with its intentionally chaotic rhythm. Energy from Mercury's solar arrays poured through the receiving station, feeding power into systems that had been transformed from perfect stability into controlled chaos. The Vextari flagship's perfect shields snapped into place, spherical fields of gravitational force that had never failed, never wavered, never been challenged by anything except the crude weapons they had easily dismissed. The first gravitational wave hit them like ripples striking a stone in a pond. But these ripples moved through space itself, their oscillating patterns creating interference with the flagship's perfect fields. "Their shield frequency is constant," Rodriguez reported. "They can't adapt. They don't know how to make their fields imperfect enough to counter ours." Sarah watched as the massive ship's shields began to shimmer. The Vextari had built their defenses to be immutable, unchanging, perfect. But against humanity's modified weapon, perfection became predictability. Layer by layer, the flagship's shields began to peel away. Each gravitational wave found resonance points in the perfect fields, creating cascading disruptions that the Vextari systems couldn't compensate for. They had never conceived of intentionally introducing chaos into their systems. "Your imperfection cannot defeat perfection," the Vextari insisted, but there was something new in their voice now. "Fear. Perfection isn't the end," Sarah replied, watching as their mighty ship began to come apart in precisely controlled layers, just as Deimos had. "It's just the foundation for something new." The flagship's perfect hull separated into concentric shells, each one held in place by overlapping gravitational waves. The smaller ships tried to intervene, but their identical technology made them equally vulnerable to humanity's modified weapon. In less than 5 minutes, the pride of the Vextari fleet had been transformed into an orbital artwork of suspended layers, their perfect technology undone by intentional imperfection. "This is impossible," the Vextari transmitted, their voice fracturing like their ships. "The calculations, the patterns, they cannot be." "They can," Sarah answered softly, "because we didn't try to achieve perfection. We simply made it better." The remaining Vextari ships began to retreat, their perfect formation breaking for the first time as they fled from something they could neither understand nor counter: humanity's ability to improve upon perfection itself. 3 months after the Vextari retreat, Sarah stood in the Mars facility's newly expanded research center, watching teams of scientists from across Earth studying the latest predecessor artifacts they'd uncovered. The chamber that had once held a single crystalline core now housed dozens, each one waiting to be understood and improved upon. "The Centauri delegation arrives tomorrow," Rodriguez reminded her, scrolling through data on his tablet. "They're particularly interested in our modification processes. Sarah nodded, observing a young engineer as she carefully adjusted the stability fields of a predecessor power core, intentionally introducing controlled fluctuations that would have horrified its original creators. "How many species have contacted us now?" 12, Maya answered, her hologram appearing beside them. She was still overseeing the Mercury arrays, which had become humanity's first permanent stellar energy collection system. All of them former targets of the Vextari, all of them eager to learn how we did the impossible. The impossible had become routine in the months since the battle. The revelation that predecessor technology could be modified, could be improved through imperfection, had sent shockwaves through the galaxy. Species that had lived in fear of the Vextari's technological superiority now looked to Earth for guidance. Latest report from the deep space arrays, Admiral Chen announced as he entered the chamber. The Vextari have withdrawn to their home systems. Intelligence suggests they're in the middle of a societal crisis. Apparently, the idea that their perfect technology could be defeated by intentional imperfection has caused quite the philosophical upheaval. Sarah walked to the chamber's observation window, looking out at the Martian surface where new research facilities were under construction. They forgot the most important lesson of the predecessors, she mused. The reason they abandoned these designs wasn't because they failed. It was because they had reached the end of what perfection could achieve. A group of students from the newly established Adaptive Engineering Institute passed by the window, their excited chatter carrying through the glass. They were part of the first generation that would grow up understanding that innovation wasn't about achieving perfection. It was about finding new ways to improve upon it. "The predecessor archive we found last week," Rodriguez said, pulling up a holographic display. "It's not just weapons technology. There are designs for medical systems, environmental regulators, faster-than-light drives, all of them abandoned at the point of perfection. All of them waiting to be made better through imperfection," Maya added. Her hologram gestured to the Mercury arrays visible from her station. "We're already applying the same principles to the solar collection system. By introducing controlled instabilities, we've increased power output by 30%. Admiral Chen studied the various projects underway in the chamber. "The Security Council is concerned about sharing too much of this technology too quickly. Some worry we might create a dozen new Vextari." Sarah shook her head, smiling. "That's exactly why we need to share it. The Vextari's mistake wasn't in preserving predecessor technology. It was in believing that preservation meant stagnation. They turned innovation into religion, perfection into dogma." She walked to one of the workstations where a team was examining a predecessor medical scanner. They had already begun identifying ways to modify its perfect diagnostic patterns to detect conditions its original creators had never encountered. "Every species that comes here to learn," Sarah continued, "understands that what we're teaching them isn't just about technology. It's about approach, about understanding that perfection isn't an end. It's a foundation to build upon." Through the facility's dome, the Martian sunset painted the sky in shades of red and gold. Where Deimos had once orbited, a new ring system sparkled, a permanent reminder of humanity's first step beyond perfection. In the distance, construction drones worked on the framework of the Interstellar Innovation Center, where scientists from 100 worlds would soon gather to learn humanity's most important lesson, that the future belongs not to those who achieve perfection, but to those who dare to improve upon it. "The predecessors gave us a gift," Sarah said softly, watching the stars emerge above, "not in the technology they left behind, but in the space they left for us to make it better."